Mae'n braf bod yma. Unwaith eto, mae'n braf bod y gysylltiedig ar ddau beth yma. I'm very pleased to be here representing, well, Newydd, which is like my second home. Yes. I go there at least twice every year for a week at a time. And also, of course, Wales Literature Exchange for all the nice trips I've had to all kinds of places I won't go into. I had a wonderful time with this competition. There was a competition, some of you know. I wrote a poem specially for the competition. It's called Dod i'w coed, to come to the trees, to your trees. And of course it was a provocative title because in Welsh it means growing up or come to your senses. But it can mean lots of other things, and I'll say a bit more about that in a minute. The closest we get as writers to other writers is through translation. Translation is like learning to listen to somebody else's heartbeat, to hear the breath of the writer, the breath of the poet. Morid Borgouti, the wonderful Palestinian poet, said in his memoir that it's also a way to cool the language down. I really like that idea. Hopefully, of course, the temperature rises again when we listen to a translation, a good translation. But of course, they start on their own in the world. Rilke said that texts contain infinite loneliness. So to make them less lonely, we need translation as well. So the criteria, what people want to know is how did I judge 14 wonderful translation poems. What's remarkable is that I could have awarded a prize to every one of them, any of them. There isn't a single entry that isn't worthy of being published. So how did I choose? As I said, Dod i'w coed, a provocative title perhaps, wanting to test the translator, the translators. It's a poem about trees and childhood. And as I said, can mean literally coming to your woods, coming to your senses. Here are some of the titles which shows you the range, the way people have translated it differently. In the Wood, Growth Rings, Coming of Age, Come to Their Trees, The Tree of Life, Out to the Woods, Clipping Their Wings. The poem is about my children when they were small. They used to play down on a tree down a field, which they called the ship. They were able through this branch to swing over a ford without getting wet, or so they tell me. We also used to give trees names. This is something most of us have done. There's one tree outside of Bryn Hoffnant we called the Stairs. On the way back from piano lessons, everybody used to wanting to be the first to see the stairs. So that's what the poem is about. It's about childhood, it's about innocence, but also about trees in the end being cut down. So my criteria, I wanted a translator who was a poet, and as a poet, respectful of the original poem, but also disrespectful in trying to raise the poem to stand alone on its 2 feet without the Welsh. There are some outstanding poems here. The one I returned to again and again, but almost felt as if it was a poem in its own right, without the need for a nod to Menna Elfyn. It was this one, Growth Rings, which I'll just give you a flavour of it. See how kids bloom in the care of trees. Out of brown and green grow metaphors. A bowl is a boat that bears them over a burn. A branch is a gangplank for storming a deck. The rug of ramsons is a fizzy sea. Nettles list in a rasp of wind. And then the poet returns at the end to metaphors return to being trees. Things to blunt our razor minds against. I think that's a wonderful poem, but I almost felt as if it was a poem in its own right, and that it didn't deserve my anything to do with me really, which is just wonderful. So I had the dilemma, if I were to award the prize to that poem, what are the ones who had attempted to echo more of the original poem? I returned to 2 poems which in my mind are so simple, deceptively simple. The staccato style of the ending. So from In the Woods, which is another wonderful poem, and Growth Rings, I turned to two poems which attempted to grasp the essence of the poem without straying too much into new territory. The first one was called Trees, and it starts, I love the word cherish. You know, you can see how subjective I am. Oh, how trees cherish the small children. O fel y car y coed blant bychain. Didn't quite like, give them pet names. Glas enwi is what I had in Welsh. But I love the way the poet ends with grindstone grins. The idea of a grindstone grinning when it's being sharpened with a sword hand. That was wonderful. But the one I returned to time and again was number 13, which is a lucky number for this person, whoever that person is. We'll find out in a minute. And this is a really remarkable poem. It has its own rhythm, its own dynamic, but it's also a very simple poem. The brevity of the poem, taunt, and it captures the Welsh ever so slightly. So I'll read the winning poem. Trees on Growing. How trees love little children who call them names. The bow over the brook is a ship. Tall stairs reach up to the deck above the wild Gaelic sea, and the cross current of nettle salts the forest. Some branches are good neighbours, uplifting after a fall, their bark a razor salve. Then comes nip and cut, the coming of age. Trees, after all, must be put in their place. The whetstone sings, the saws in hand. That's a wonderful poem, I think, and deserves the prize. Thank you.